The sun had barely risen when Lyra stepped into the quiet forest, her boots soft against the damp earth. Mist curled between the trees, and the distant howl of wolves echoed like a warning. She pulled her cloak tighter around her, hiding the burn on her shoulder beneath layers of cloth. No one had seen it, and she intended to keep it that way. It had happened 3 days ago. A small human pup had wandered too close to the edge of the cliff where the forest met the mountain. Without thinking, Lyra had leaped to save it, but a streak of fire from the enemy's torches had caught her arm. She had screamed, but only once, and she had saved the pup. The pain was sharp and constant, a hidden reminder of her courage and her secret vulnerability. She had returned the pup to the village, unnoticed by the people who cheered from their windows. They didn't know the price she had paid. They never noticed the scars that bravery often leaves behind. And yet, there was someone who had. Far above, hidden on a stone balcony of the royal palace, the Alpha King watched. He was a figure carved from shadows, tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to see into the soul. He had been tracking the movements of his son Kyle, the young heir who had narrowly survived a recent attack. But the boy had not been the only one to catch the king's attention. Lyra. The king's gaze lingered on her, drawn by a fire he had not seen in years. She moved through the forest like a storm, quiet but relentless, her cloak fluttering behind her. He noticed the way her hand instinctively brushed her shoulder, as if she were trying to hide the pain beneath her clothing. That small gesture told him more than any report from his scouts. She had risked her life for someone else. And for that, she burned with a courage that both fascinated and unsettled him. Lyra did not know she was being watched. She only knew that the forest was dangerous, that enemies could appear at any moment, and that she had a duty to protect the innocent. Her steps led her to a clearing where the sunlight broke through the fog, revealing a shallow stream. She knelt, dipping her hands into the cold water, letting the liquid wash over her burned skin. The pain was there, a sharp reminder of her act of bravery, but also a mark of her determination. She pressed her lips together, willing herself to endure it. She could not let anyone see weakness. Not now, not ever. A sudden rustle in the trees made her tense. Wolves, she thought, moving gracefully among the shadows. But when the figure emerged, it was not an animal. Kyle stumbled into the clearing, his arm bandaged, his face pale but alert. He froze when he saw her, and for a moment neither spoke. "You saved the pup," he said finally, his voice low, filled with a mix of awe and gratitude. I heard what happened." Lyra shook her head quickly, hiding her arm beneath her cloak. "It was nothing," she said softly. "Just a small fire. The pup would have died if I hadn't been there." Kyle studied her carefully, noticing the faint line of red that still showed through the fabric. "It doesn't look like nothing," he murmured. His eyes, filled with worry, searched hers. "You should not have risked yourself for that little creature." Lyra forced a smile, though it did not reach her eyes. "Sometimes we do what must be done, even if it hurts." Her voice was firm, but inside her heart raced. Kyle's gaze lingered, and she felt a strange warmth, a connection she could not yet name. High above, the Alpha King's shadowed figure remained on the balcony. He saw the way Kyle looked at Lyra, saw the quiet admiration in the boy's eyes, and he saw the subtle pride with which she stood, hiding her pain yet refusing to bow. The king's lips pressed into a thin line. This woman, this mortal, this warrior, had captured his attention. Not for her beauty, not for her lineage, but for the fire she carried within her. And the fire she carried for his son. Lyra and Kale remained in the clearing until the sun rose higher, turning mist to silver light. She finally spoke, breaking the silence that had grown between them. "You should return to the palace before anyone notices you are gone," she said. "Your father will worry." Kyle hesitated, glancing toward the distant spires of the castle where the walls gleamed white and cold. "He is always watching," he said, "always judging. But I wish I could stay here longer. With you." Lyra's heart tightened. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same, that the scar on her shoulder was not the only thing she hid, that there was a fire in her chest that had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with him. But she could not. Duty came first. Survival came first. And the forest had ears, even if the palace did not. "You must go," she said instead, hiding her conflict behind calm eyes. "Your father, he does not like hesitation." Cale nodded reluctantly, but he did not leave. He stayed a few steps back, watching her. "You are extraordinary," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You do not know it, do you?" Lyra's fingers twitched, wanting to reach for him, to touch his hand, to tell him that bravery was never truly extraordinary when it was born from love and protection. But the moment passed and she simply bowed her head. "I do what I must," she said. As Cale vanished into the trees, Lyra allowed herself a small sigh of relief. But the forest was not silent. Somewhere unseen, the Alpha King's eyes followed every step she took. He had seen her courage, her fear, and the fire she hid beneath her calm exterior. And he was not satisfied with watching from afar. Later that evening, Lyra returned to her modest cabin on the edge of the village. She tended to the burn herself, her hands trembling slightly as she cleaned the wound. The scar would remain hidden, but the memory of the pain would never fade. She pressed a finger to the center of it, feeling the heat that still lingered, a reminder that she had given part of herself to protect another. A knock at the door startled her. She tightened her cloak around her shoulder and went to open it, expecting a neighbor or a messenger from the village. But no one was there. Only a single black feather lay on the doorstep, its edges glinting in the moonlight. Lyra picked it up, her heart skipping a beat. Black feathers were a symbol of the Alpha King's presence, a warning or a message depending on the intent behind it. She turned it over in her hand, and a chill ran down her spine. Someone had been watching her, and it was not just Cale. She did not sleep that night. She lay awake, listening to the wind rustling through the trees, imagining the king's eyes on her, the weight of his scrutiny pressing down like a shadow. She could not see his expression, could not know what he intended, but she felt the burn of his attention as real and sharp as the scar she hid. By dawn, Lyra had made a decision. She could not show fear, she could not show weakness. She would continue to hide the scar, continue to fight, continue to protect those who could not protect themselves. But she would also prepare for the day when the king would step from the shadows, when Cale's life would again be in danger, or when fate demanded that her fire be tested. And deep in the palace, the Alpha King watched as dawn broke over the kingdom. His gaze lingered on the forest beyond, where Lyra moved like a silent flame. He had seen the courage, the pain, and the loyalty she carried for his son. And in the quiet of the early morning, he whispered to no one, not even himself, "You carry fire for my son, and I will see it tested." The words hung in the air like a shadow, a promise and a threat all at once. Lyra, unaware of the king's presence, continued her mourning, tending to her small tasks and the hidden burn that marked her bravery. But the forest seemed different, now alive with unseen eyes, and a sense of destiny pressed upon her heart. The scar she had tried to hide was no longer just a mark of pain. It was the beginning of a story, one that would bind her to the Alpha King, to his son, and to a fate she could neither escape nor deny. And somewhere in the shadows, the fire, in the king's eyes, mirrored the fire in hers, waiting for the moment when their paths would collide. The forest was thick with mist, curling between the trees like silver smoke. Lyra moved carefully along the narrow path, her cloak damp from the morning dew. Her shoulder still ached from the hidden burn, a constant reminder of her bravery, but there was no time to linger on pain. Danger never rested, and neither could she. Kyle's words from the clearing still echoed in her mind. "You are extraordinary. You do not know it, do you?" His admiration had been quiet, almost shy, yet it had stirred something deep within her chest. She had hidden her scar to protect herself, but the way he looked at her had made her wonder. Could he see more than the surface? Could he understand the fire beneath? Lyra reached the edge of the forest, where twisted roots gave way to a high cliff overlooking the valley below. The wind tugged at her cloak, and for a moment she paused, gazing at the village far below. It was peaceful now, unaware of the battles that threatened it daily. Her heart clenched at the thought of all those who could be hurt, all those she might have to save. She did not see him at first, the tall figure emerging from the fog, his presence commanding and quiet. "The Alpha King. You move like the shadows themselves follow you," he said, his voice low and measured, carrying authority without raising itself. Lyra froze. She had expected him to remain in the palace, watching from afar. Yet here he stood, the wind catching the edges of his dark cloak, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. She began. But he raised a hand, stopping her. "Do not speak, not yet. I have watched you, Lyra. You hide your pain, your fire, your scars, and yet you burn for others more than for yourself." Lyra's fingers tightened around the edge of her cloak, instinctively covering the burn she thought no one could see. "I do what I must," she said, her voice steady despite the sudden flutter in her chest. "And you do it well," the king said, stepping closer. "But fire once seen cannot be hidden. Not from me, not from those it touches." Lyra did not move. She felt the weight of his gaze, heavy and intense. Like the forest itself had stopped to listen, she knew he could not simply be a watcher in the shadows anymore. His presence demanded something from her. Acknowledgement, courage, maybe even trust. Before she could respond, a rustling came from the underbrush. Lyra's hand went to the dagger at her waist, her instincts sharp as ever. A wolf emerged, its coat dark and eyes bright, circling her as if assessing. The Alpha King did not flinch. "Do not fear them," he said softly. "They are drawn to you, as am I." Lyra's heart beat faster, not from the wolf's presence, but from the meaning behind his words. He was not just a king. He was a force, a power that could command, judge, and protect. And he had noticed her, not for her skill alone, but for the fire she carried for his son. Cale stepped forward from the path behind her, bandages still wrapped tightly around his arm. "Lyra," he said, his voice laced with worry. "Are you hurt again?" "I am fine," she replied quickly, hiding her discomfort with a practiced smile. "It's nothing." But Cale's gaze lingered on her shoulder, faintly visible beneath the folds of her cloak. He reached out instinctively as if to touch the burn, then stopped himself, unsure. "You don't have to hide it," he said softly. "Not from me." Lyra looked away, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She wanted to tell him the truth, to confess the fear and pride that tangled within her. But the moment was broken by a sudden roar from the forest. A beast larger than any she had faced before crashed into the clearing. Its eyes glowed with unnatural fire, and smoke trailed from its nostrils. It bellowed, shaking the trees, sending birds into the sky in a chaotic flurry. Kyle stepped back instinctively, his injuries making him less able to fight. Lyra moved forward, dagger drawn, her fire burning bright. She did not hesitate. The beast lunged, but she dodged, rolling to the side and striking at its flank. Her arm burned again, not from the old scar, but from exertion and the raw force of her will. The king watched silently from the edge of the clearing, his eyes narrowing. He could see her courage, her determination, the way she placed herself between danger and those who could not defend themselves. And yet there was something more. Her fire was not only bravery, it was love, loyalty, and sacrifice all intertwined. The battle was swift but intense. Lyra moved like a shadow in a storm, striking, dodging, and guiding Cale safely behind her. The beast roared one final time, then collapsed, defeated not only by her skill but by the unyielding will behind her actions. When the dust settled, Lyra sank to her knees, her breathing heavy, her cloak torn. Cale rushed to her side, eyes wide with worry. "Lyra, are you—" "I am fine," she gasped, forcing a smile through her exhaustion. "The scar, it does not matter. I can bear it." Kyle shook his head, his hand brushing against hers. "It does matter," he said quietly. "It matters to me. You matter to me." Lyra felt a rush of warmth and confusion, a feeling she had tried to ignore. Her heart pounded, not from the battle but from his words, his touch, the raw honesty in his gaze. The Alpha King stepped forward, his presence commanding the clearing. "You see, Lyra," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "The fire you carry is not just for survival. It is for those you love, and love once noticed cannot be ignored." Lyra rose slowly, facing him, her hand still trembling slightly. She did not understand him, nor did she fully trust the weight of his gaze. But she knew one thing: he had seen her. Her courage, her scars, her fire, they were no longer hidden. The king extended a hand, not in threat but in acknowledgement. "You have earned more than my notice," he said. "You have earned a place in what is to come. But know this: danger is not over and your fire will be tested again." Lyra swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She had survived the beast, saved the pup, and protected Kale. But the king's gaze reminded her that her journey was only beginning. The hidden burn on her shoulder was more than a mark. It was a symbol of the trials ahead. As night fell, the forest grew quiet again. Lyra and Kale returned to the village, their steps slow, their minds heavy with what had happened. Kale did not speak, but his hand brushed against hers in a gesture of silent support. Lyra's heart stirred, knowing that connection was growing stronger, delicate yet powerful. High above, the Alpha King returned to his tower, his eyes lingering on the moonlit forest. He had seen the battle, the courage, and the bond forming between Lyra and his son. A shadow of a smile touched his lips. He knew the fire she carried could shape destinies, and he would watch, patient and relentless, until the moment it was fully revealed. A whisper of wind carried a single word through the trees: "Prepare." Lyra did not hear it, but the forest seemed to shift, alive with unseen eyes and distant voices. The prophecy that had been written long ago, one that spoke of fire and loyalty, danger and love, was beginning to unfold. The hidden scar on Lyra's shoulder was no longer just a wound. It was a mark of destiny, a symbol of the trials she would face, and the fire that would define her place in the Alpha King's world. And somewhere, far above the cliffs, the king's voice echoed in the darkness, a quiet vow that promised both protection and challenge. "You burn for my son, and that fire will shape all that is to come." Lyra felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her as she finally rested for the night. The scar on her shoulder itched slightly, a reminder of past pain and the fire still burning within her. She knew that the next challenge would come soon, and that the bond between her, Kale, and the king was far from simple. Fate had begun its work, and she could not run from it. The forest, alive with whispers, seemed to hum a warning and a promise. Lyra's hidden fire was no longer hers alone. The sky over the kingdom was dark and heavy with clouds. A storm rumbled in the distance, lightning flashing like silver knives across the horizon. Lyra stood on the cliff edge, her cloak whipping in the wind, eyes scanning the valley below. The rival clan had returned, stronger, more dangerous than before, and this time they sought more than territory. They sought the Alpha's bloodline. Kale was at her side, his arm healed but still bandaged in places. His face was pale but determined, and when their eyes met, Lyra saw both fear and courage mirrored there. The bond between them had grown stronger since the last battle, unspoken yet powerful. She felt the fire of loyalty and love between them, a spark that had begun in the forest and now burned brighter under the stormy sky. The Alpha King arrived silently, his presence like shadow and steel combined. He did not speak at first, merely observing Lyra and Kyle. There was a tension in the air, a weight that pressed against the clouds themselves. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, commanding, yet not unkind. "You have both grown," he said, eyes never leaving Lyra. "And yet the fire that burns within you, Lyra, will be tested more than ever. Do not falter. This is your destiny." Lyra straightened, the hidden burn on her shoulder now fully healed but still marked faintly, a symbol of her trials and courage. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever comes, I will stand." Kyle nodded, his hand brushing hers in a silent pact. Together they descended toward the valley where the enemy waited. Shadows moved among the trees, and the rival clan's warriors emerged, armed and cruel, their eyes glowing with ambition. The battle began without warning, a clash of steel and fire that shook the earth. Lyra moved with precision and speed, her dagger striking true, guiding Kale when he faltered, and protecting him from blows that would have ended a lesser warrior. The king watched from the edge of the battle, silent, calculating, yet there was a hint of admiration in his eyes. He had seen warriors before, but none like her, none who carried fire for others with such unwavering courage. The rival clan pushed forward, but Lyra and Kale's bond became their strength. Their movements were in sync, their instincts aligned, and together they held the enemy at bay. Each strike, each dodge, each protective gesture deepened the unspoken connection between them. Yet the fiercest test had not yet come. From the shadow of the trees, a massive beast emerged, larger and more terrifying than any they had faced before. Its eyes burned with a supernatural light, its claws tearing at the earth as it approached. Lyra's heart clenched, but she did not hesitate. She stepped in front of Cale, her cloak billowing in the wind, dagger in hand. The king's voice echoed in her mind, a reminder and a warning. Your fire will be tested. Do not falter. Lyra met the beast's gaze, her scar burning faintly as if reminding her of the past and the courage she had already shown. She struck first, moving with speed and precision, but the beast was relentless. Cale moved beside her, supporting her, their actions flowing as one. Together, they fought not only for themselves but for the kingdom, for the people who could not protect themselves, and for the bond that had grown between them. The battle raged, fierce and unyielding. Lyra's dagger met flesh and claw. Cale's strikes protected and defended. Each time she faltered, Cale's presence steadied her. Each time Cale hesitated, her courage pushed him forward. And above them, the Alpha King's eyes never left the battlefield, watching, calculating, and preparing for the moment when intervention might be needed. Finally, with a surge of strength and determination, Lyra delivered the final strike. The beast roared, a sound that shook the valley before collapsing at her feet. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the heavy breathing of those who survived. Lyra sank to her knees, exhaustion coursing through her, but relief and pride mingled with the ache in her body. Cale knelt beside her, his hand finding hers, their fingers intertwining. We did it, he said, voice trembling with both fear and joy. Together. Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. Together, she echoed. The Alpha King approached, his cloak catching the wind, his gaze fixed on Lyra. She rose slowly, meeting his eyes, the fire within her still burning despite the exhaustion. You have proven yourself, he said, his voice calm but filled with power. Not only to me, but to the kingdom, to my son, and to the destiny that awaits you. Lyra bowed her head slightly, feeling the weight of his words. She had faced danger, protected the innocent, and endured pain. Yet the king's acknowledgement carried more weight than victory alone. He had seen her fully, and he had chosen to recognize her courage. Cale stood beside her, and together they looked at the king. There was no fear now, only respect, and an understanding that the bond between them had changed. The king's power was undeniable, yet there was a quiet honor in the way he acknowledged her strength. Your fire will always be needed, the king continued, his eyes locking with hers, and I will see it protected even if it means guiding it myself. Lyra's heart beat faster, but not with fear. She understood the meaning behind his words. He did not merely watch. He would shape, protect, and challenge her, ensuring that the fire she carried would never be wasted. The storm that had threatened the valley now broke, rain pouring down in sheets, washing away the blood and ash from the battlefield. Lyra and Cale stood side by side, rain soaking their clothes, but their hearts were steady. The fire that had tested them, burned them, and shaped them had also bonded them. The Alpha King stepped closer, stopping just a few paces away. Lyra, he said, his voice quiet but commanding, you burned for my son, and now that fire belongs to all of us. You have earned your place here, not by weakness, not by fear, but by courage, loyalty, and the strength to protect. Lyra looked up, meeting his gaze, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like a mantle. She had hidden her scar, hidden her pain, hidden her fire, but now none of it needed to be hidden. She had proven herself not only to Cale, to the king or the kingdom, but to herself. Cale stepped closer, placing a hand over hers. I am proud of you, he said, his voice steady, filled with emotion. And I care for you more than I have ever cared for anyone. Lyra's chest tightened, but a small, genuine smile broke across her face. And I for you, she replied softly. The Alpha King watched silently, but his eyes softened slightly. He had tested them, challenged them, and observed the fire that bound them. And now he knew that the bonds of fate had been forged, tempered by fire, courage, and love. As the storm eased, a rainbow arched across the sky, casting a glow over the valley. Lyra, Cale, and the king stood together, each understanding their place in the larger story unfolding around them. The rival clan had been defeated, the beast vanquished, and the kingdom safe for now, yet the scar on Lyra's shoulder, though healed, remained a symbol of her bravery and the fire that had shaped her journey. The battles were over, but the story was not finished. Bonds had been formed, loyalties tested, and destinies revealed. And in the quiet moments after the storm, Lyra realized something profound: courage. Love and loyalty were stronger than any shadow, any enemy, any fire. The Alpha King stepped forward one last time, his voice a calm promise. "You burned for my son, Lyra, and now you are part of what must endure. Your fire will guide us, protect us, and bind us all." Lyra met his gaze, feeling a warmth she had never known. She had faced danger, hidden her scars, and endured fire. But in the end, she had found something greater: respect, loyalty, and a bond that could not be broken. Kale squeezed her hand, and together they watched the sunrise, the light spilling over the valley, illuminating the paths they had taken and the future that awaited. The storm had passed, but the fire within them remained, bright, unyielding, and eternal. And somewhere in the shadows, the Alpha King smiled faintly, knowing that the woman who had burned for his son had become far more than a warrior. She had become the heart of their story, the fire that would guide them through whatever darkness lay ahead. The hidden scar was no longer a secret, but a mark of destiny, and Lyra, standing with Kale and the king, understood that her journey was complete, not in solitude, not in secrecy, but in courage, love, and the bonds of fate that had brought them together.